Hey guys, what are all the things that you need to do before moving to the UK? That's a great question. My name is Alana and I'm a Canadian, but I have been living here in the UK for the last 8 years. So today we're going to talk about all the things that you should be planning, considering, organizing before you get on your flight to the UK. So assuming you already have a visa lined up, or perhaps your visa has been approved and now you're just waiting. What should you be doing? Now, for me, a big one had to do with selling my car and a bunch of other car-related bits. Now, if you don't have a car, you can just skip this section. This is one of the things I did fairly early on, once my visa was approved, is to sell my car. And kind of broke my heart. And maybe you want to leave your car with a family member while you're in the UK, but for me, it was like, I'm gonna be gone for a while, let's sell it. So I took it to a car wash. I got it all nice and pretty. I took everything out of it. I took some really nice photos of it, and then I listed it on Facebook Marketplace and Auto Trader. So I did this a good like 2 months maybe before I moved, because I wasn't really sure how long it was gonna take, and I definitely wanted it to be completed and sold before I left. You might be able to get a family member to sell your car on your behalf while you're in the UK, but you have to sign a lot of stuff personally because like the car was in my name. So I really wanted this done and dusted before I left. It was like one less thing to think about. So I got a guy who wanted to buy it. I was still commuting to work, so we just arranged a final date for when I would be done with work and he could come and get it, and then that was that. It was actually kind of sad. I really missed that car. With this point, I would also say make sure to cancel any car insurance or any sort of subscription thing related to your car. And also, one final thing with this, if possible, I would consider renewing your driving license in your home country. So as an immigrant, you can drive on a foreign driver's license for 1 year in the UK. However, certain countries have an agreement with the UK that allows you to switch or exchange your home country driver's license for a British one without taking any tests. So these are countries like Canada, Australia. It's what I did, and I would absolutely recommend it if you are able to do so. The catch is you cannot exchange a driving license if it is expired. So you may not get around to this for a while when you land in the UK. So if you can renew your home license, at least you know that you have the longest amount possible before reaching that exchange cutoff time limit. Because once your home license is expired, you can't exchange it. Even if you are technically allowed to do so, it has to be a valid license. So just something to think about. I do have lots of videos on my channel about exchanging your license or about driving in the UK if that's something that you're interested in. Next up, what did I do? Oh, I gave notice at work. And let me tell you, this is when it really sunk in that I was moving to a foreign country. So my job contract required me to give 2 weeks notice. Pretty standard, but my job, like my boss and coworkers and stuff, knew way before because we were all friends and they knew I was moving. So I gave much more notice than really necessary. But we set up a schedule of like when my last day was gonna be. We also had time so I could train a replacement, and that was it. But this was really the moment when it really kicked in, like giving my notice on a job that I really liked that job and getting my end date, and it was kind of like, oh, this is really happening. Another thing you should consider before moving has to do with suitcases. I honestly didn't think this would be a thing, but surprisingly it is. Now, suitcases are not cheap, and they are not a standard size. Every airline has a different requirement when it comes to checked bags. So make sure to measure whichever bags that you are going to check that you already have. Measure them to make sure that they fit the requirements for the airline that you'll be flying with. For me, I always fly Air Transat between London and Toronto. The prices are always good, so I actually bought suitcases that were the largest size possible for Air Transat. Because you may find during this exercise that you either don't have enough suitcases or they're too big, or they're drastically too small, and you want to make use of the largest amount of space possible. So give yourself time to figure out the measurements that your airline requires. What suitcases do you have? Measure them. Do they fit? Do they not fit? Do you need to buy new stuff? Give yourself time to sort out your suitcases. Now, when I moved to England, I paid for a ticket that included one checked bag. And then on top of that, I paid for an additional checked bag. So I had my 2 big checked bags, of which I had bought for this move. And then I had a carry-on. I had one of like the rolly carry-ons, and then I had a purse. And then when I came back to Canada for a visit, probably like 6 months later, I kind of go every summertime, I tried to bring as little as possible to Canada with my one checked bag. So when I went back to England, I could fill it up a bit more with stuff that didn't make it over in the first flight. I wouldn't bring more than 2 checked bags, only if you're moving with like your entire family or you've got kids. You know, there's a lot of extra stuff that comes with that. But as a single person, just one person, 2 checked bags really was more than enough. But don't leave this until the last second. It actually does take some time. Figure out what suitcases you have. Do they fit? Do they not fit? Do you need more? Are they too small, too big, whatever? Do this early, because with the suitcases, you are also going to want to practice packing. Now, I had never moved abroad before, so I really had no frame of reference or no idea of how to pack. So you have to practice. Now, once you know what suitcases you're bringing, so for me, it was those 2 big checked bags and my little roller suitcase, lay them all out and practice. Because you'll find out pretty quickly that what you envisioned on bringing is not gonna fit. So I would practice packing and fill them up, weigh them, because there is a weight restriction, right? So I'd weigh them and be like, okay, that's way too heavy. Or this stuff doesn't fit and I can't close it. So then you gotta figure out like what comes out. What's the priority? What's less of a priority? Moving things between suitcases. It will take some practice. For me, I would prioritize the most expensive items. So all of like my tech, my technology, my cameras, my computers, all that kind of stuff. Also, like a winter coat can be pretty expensive, or boots can be pretty expensive. Like the more expensive items I would prioritize, and I would also prioritize the things that you will need right away. The UK has some wonderful shopping, some wonderful shops and clothes and all sorts of things, and you can absolutely rebuy as much or as little as you need when you get here. But ideally, you don't want to be rebuying the stuff that's most expensive, or the stuff that you need when you land. So for me, I moved in the winter time, so I prioritize expensive stuff, but also some of the more winter type clothing. I could rebuy summer stuff later. It was not a priority. It wasn't summer. I wasn't gonna need it, but I was gonna need warm clothes literally on day 1. Another thing I think you should consider before boarding your flight is getting your prescriptions. Now, as part of your UK visa, you are allowed to use the healthcare here in the UK. You're allowed to use the NHS, which means you can get a doctor, you can go see them whenever you want, you can get prescriptions. You will likely have to pay typically, but it's very cheap here in the UK. But you'll be able to use all those services like a British person. However, it's definitely helpful, and it takes a bit of the stress away from moving if you can get the most allowed amount of your current prescriptions from your current doctor. So when you move to the UK, it's not something that you need to be worrying about immediately. So a few weeks before my flight to England, I had an appointment with my doctor. I explained to her that I was moving. Can I have as much of my prescriptions as I'm allowed? She said, sure, I'll give you a little bit extra. So it was costly, but I was allowed a huge amount of my prescriptions, and I made sure to pack those because that's a priority. And that way, when I landed in the UK, I didn't have to immediately, like day 1, be trying to get a doctor and then having an appointment, like registering with them and then trying to get my prescriptions. I had some like breathing room to do that. I also made sure to pack any like prescription slips, or really, you could just take a picture of your prescription slip or the prescription box itself. That way, when you meet with your UK doctor, you can show them exactly what you're taking. Another thing you'll want to consider is to cancel your subscriptions. So this could be things like your cell phone contract. If you are not going to be using it in the UK, if you're going to be getting something here, you'll need to cancel your home country one, obviously, or any like software type subscription streaming services that you're not going to use in the UK, any of those types of things, make sure to cancel. Most of these things probably can be done online, and you could do them in the UK once you get here, but it's nice to kind of do it ahead of time. So when you're here and you're stressing about living in a foreign country, it's just one less thing to think about. Oh, a local gym membership. If you have a gym membership, that's another one that people often forget about, perhaps. Just make sure to cancel it. Now, an awkward one has to do with rent and housing. Now, when I moved to the UK, I was living back home with my family. That made it absolutely painless and simple and easy. I didn't have to worry about paying my last rent thing to a landlord. I didn't have to worry about aligning the days of like when I need to be out of the property and when I'm moving and all that kind of stuff. It was like the most simple possible option. If you are living on your own, I would highly recommend perhaps moving with your family or a friend or something, so you can worry less about aligning those dates. Does that make sense? Not really. Hold on. It can be really awkward scheduling this kind of thing, because say your landlord wants you out of the property on the 10th, but you're not moving to the UK till the 20th. Or vice versa, you're moving on the 10th, but your landlord wants you to pay rent for the following month. It's just kind of like messy. It's certainly doable, of course, but if you are able to move in with a friend or a family member, even just for the last week or two, so you don't have to try and align getting your apartment emptied and cleaned and then moving, but then you have to get out of that apartment early and all that kind of stuff. If it's not possible or you just can't be bothered, you're gonna move from your apartment to the UK, just make sure you are able to organize that with your landlord. So when is your last rent? What day will you be getting out? When will you be organizing like cleaning and like emptying of the apartment and all that kind of stuff? You'll have to plan that a good chunk in advance. With this section, I would also say, where are you living in the UK? So for me, honestly, I had it very simple. I was moving from my parents' home in Canada, and I was moving in with my British boyfriend in England. So I knew where I was living in Canada, and I knew where I was living in the UK, and this was something that I really didn't have to think about. If this is not the case for you, you need to figure out when you land in the UK, where are you sleeping that night? So this may be setting up a hostel. Maybe even for the first month. Some hostels have like long-term stays, so you can stay in a hostel while you figure out where you want to live. It may mean applying for a flat sight unseen, essentially, and signing a flat before you even get to the UK, so you go straight to the flat. Whatever it is, you do need to have some sort of plan, because when you land, like, you gotta have some place to sleep. Another thing to consider, and if you have time, I would recommend updating your resume while you're still in your home country, and maybe you're just kind of like killing time, like maybe you finished with your job but you're not moving for a couple of weeks and you're kind of in this in-between phase. I definitely would consider updating your resume, or as the Brits call it, your CV. If you're not sure how to write a good resume or how British resumes typically look, I do have a video, I'll link it in the description. On that video, I go through exactly what my resume looks like, but I also provide a template that you can download and use for yourself. It's pretty hectic when you first move abroad, when you first land, there's like a lot of stuff going on. So if you could do this ahead of time and take one thing off your plate for when you land in the UK, I do think it's helpful. Now, kind of an awkward one, and this one kind of goes either way, I want to talk about applying for jobs. Now, I have some thoughts, so hear me out. For me, I started applying to UK job openings about a week before I boarded my flight. The idea being any earlier would kind of be pointless and wasting people's time, because I wasn't in the country, I couldn't do an interview unless they were open for like a Zoom interview. But back in 2015, basically nobody did Zoom interviews, so it wasn't really a thing. So I started 1 week early. While I was in Canada that week, I got 2 job interviews for the first week I would be in England. I did both of those interviews and I was rejected for both of them. I kept applying. I was applying to jobs like it was my literal job, and I do think that's the way you need to look at it. And eventually, I'd say about a month later, I got my first UK job. So that's what I did. However, I kind of regret starting immediately, and I kind of wished that when I landed in the UK, I gave myself a week, 2 weeks to just kind of settle, maybe even do like a little bit of traveling locally before settling into the 9 to 5 everyday routine. Now that may not work for you in terms of how much cash you have saved up. I just kind of wish that I did it that way. So really it's up to you. Before you move to the UK, you could certainly start applying, and maybe you need to based on your type of position. I kind of wish that I had waited. I had enough money saved up that I could have taken the 2 weeks, you know, to just relax and to settle in and to explore my new home before really like diving in to applying to jobs just all day, every day. So this one is very much up to you. You want to start early? Cool. But just know that you don't have to. Of course, this is assuming you're moving to the UK on a visa that doesn't require you to already have a job. So for me, moving to the UK, it was the youth mobility visa, which does not need you to have employment before moving. Anyway, I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions, please leave a comment down below. Definitely check out this video. I talk about what you should be doing your first week in the UK. But until then, I'll see you in the next one.